Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Slovenia once again, and that of course means that we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers from the latest instalment of the Davor box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Davor Šireč, my Slovenian beer mule, the OG beer mule here on RampantLionReviews as well. Davor has been supplying me with beer since about 2016, if memory serves me correctly, and it's thanks to him that I've been able to review some Slovenian beers that I otherwise would not have been able to get a hold of. But he always includes a few interesting Belgian things in there as well, and in fact that seems to be what he's most interested in. He loves these Belgian beers, and his cellar is really something to behold. I'm quite jealous of some of the beers that he has in his cellar, of course. It's just absolutely insane. But a lovely guy, extremely knowledgeable, particularly about Belgian beers, and he's been sending me some awesome stuff over the years. So once again, Davor, a massive thank you to you for making this review and the other Slovenian ones possible here on the channel. But hopefully you'll see Davor again on one of the live streams fairly soon. He does pop in and out quite often, and I do hope that once this whole COVID-19 thing buggers off, I can finally get down to Slovenia and visit him and visit a few of these breweries that I've been reviewing over the years as well. So yeah, we'll see about making that happen. But in the meantime, let's have a little look at this beer. So for this review then, we are going to return to Ljubljana, the capital city, almost in the dead centre of Slovenia, and we're having a look at another beer from Pivovarna Omnivar, and this is going to be my third review from these guys, if memory serves me correctly. But they're also known as Omnivar Brewery in English, and these guys do some really interesting kind of yeast forward beers from what I remember. But yeah, this one is called the Double Date. It comes in at 7.6% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is a Belgian style double. So yeah, the other two beers that I had from these guys, it was the Tutti Frutti, which was a New England hazy IPA, and then we had the Sissi, which was a sort of Vienna lager, and both of those were really interesting. So I have to say, I'm quite curious to see how a Belgian beer from these guys turns out, because as I say, this brewery is a little bit kind of yeast forward in how they do things. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Always cool to get some Slovenian reviews for you here on the channel. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Pivovarna Omnivar as well, and we will hopefully add some more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Slovenian beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, basically whenever I have some Davor beers in the fridge to review. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Pivovarna Omnivar then, on to my brewery notes. So Omnivar, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Ljubljana, the capital city in the centre of Slovenia, and the company was founded back in 2017 by two homebrewers. So this is Miha Kovac and Jure Vesligai. So Miha came from a background as a veterinary doctor, whereas Jure studied geography, but he left the company in the early stages and went on to work for Beer Factory in Switzerland, and he also worked for Tectonic, also in Ljubljana as well. But the name of this brewery is twofold. Omni comes from the Latin for everything, whereas var comes from the Slovenian word for brewery, pivovar, and so they basically intend that the meaning of this name is that they want to brew every different style. But they also want to do a lot more collaboration beers with other breweries over the next little while, and these days they are still quite a small brewery. In fact, they're producing around 550 hectolitres of beer per year, so that's about 55,000 litres, and as of May 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced 55 different kinds of beer. I'm not sure if their activities have kind of gone down a little bit over the whole COVID-19 pandemic and things like that, but when they are such a small business, I would think they probably have gone down a little bit actually. But yeah, Miha is still the man behind the brewery, doing everything I think. So yeah, it is quite a small operation at the moment, but their beers are pretty good, so I'm sure we'll maybe see them expanding a little bit over the coming years. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Omnivar for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer itself then. I'm very curious to see what it has in store for us. So just a little quick look at the artwork on this one then before we open it up. You can see it is kind of similar to what we had on the other ones, just a a different pattern and things like that. It looks a little bit like a kind of kaleidoscope or something like this. But there you can see the Omnivar brewery symbol, Pivovarna Omnivar. It's this sort of triangle within the circle. It seems to be their symbol. So there you go. I think it works really quite nicely, but it also tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. So it says, do you think monks have dates? Perhaps, we don't know. A monastic beer style and dates from the Middle East? Of course, it's possible. You're holding it, right? So we're not monastic and not from the Middle East, but we, as many others, think that darker Belgian beers are complemented by dark, dried fruits. So we decided to make this concoction. East meets West, fruit meets beer. A double with the addition of dates. So this beer goes with an Abbey's type cheese, or 1001 Nights Tale before bedtime. We leave that to you in the spirit of friendship. Santé. So yeah, that is pretty cool. So yeah, this one is basically yeah, Belgian style Dubbel with dried dates in it. That should be quite interesting. So yeah, let's crack this one open then and see how we get on. As you can see, it's a half-litre bottle, this one, so it's 7.6%. This one will give you a little bit of a buzz, I'm sure. But yeah, 7.6% Belgian style Dubbel. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what this has in store for us. So, a little bit of smoke on the opening, and it's behaving itself, because I remember the Omnivar beers were pretty active before. These ones tended to be quite yeast forward from what I remember, so you had to be a little bit careful with them. But let's get this guy out and into the glass and see how we get on. Curious about this beer, for sure. Alright, so there we are. Let's wind this up a little bit. Let's have a little look at it. So I always have to check that the bottle's lined up with the camera just so that my OCD is happy. But right, before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with about a 1/4 to 1/3 finger of an ivory coloured head. It looks very nice actually. Maybe fawn is a better way to describe this one. But yeah, that head is just fading away to be a very, very thin foamy layer, and there's a nice sort of foamy ring around the edge of the glass there. But I mean, overall, it does look very, very nice actually. So yeah, I have to say it looks pretty good, this one. But in terms of the colour, this beer also looks very nice. It's got a lovely kind of rich mahogany type colour to it as well. I think to you guys on the camera, it actually looks a little bit more kind of red than it is. But yeah, if I shine the light through this, it's got a lovely kind of mahogany, sort of dark coppery colour to it actually. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and yeah, it is actually pretty clear, this one. It's got a sort of natural haze to it, but otherwise the beer is pretty clear. So yeah, in terms of the Belgian Dubbel, this isn't a million miles away from what you'd expect. I've always seen Belgian Dubbels being a little bit kind of darker than this. Quite often the ones I've seen have been a little hazier as well, but I guess that varies from brewery to brewery. In honesty, the Dubbel isn't a style that I drink all that often. I tend to prefer the triples and the quadruples as well. But yeah, the doubles tend to be, for me, the doubles tend to be a little bit kind of phenolic and things like that. And I always felt in the doubles that the phenolic quality was a wee bit strong for me compared to the slightly stronger ones. So maybe I need to try a few more doubles on the channel over the next little while. But yeah, this one certainly looks the part of a double. There's no real question about that. And as I say, one of the more kind of mahogany ones that I've come across. So yeah, I think that's all we can really see about the appearance of this one. A lovely rich kind of copper colour, a sort of fawn coloured head to it. So yeah, also crystal clear. Sometimes these beers can be a little bit hazy, but nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on with this one. Very, very curious. Ooh, That does smell very nice, actually. Yeah, so a whole mix of things going on with these. Remember with these Belgian style beers as well, and it tells you on the ingredients list here, what they often do with these ones is they put a little bit of a kind of candy sugar or something like that in them to, you know, give the fermentation a little bit of an extra boost. So quite often what you get with these beers is quite a light mouthfeel, but a little bit of extra carbonation and a high alcohol content. So that's a trick that's used with the doubles, the triples and the quadruples. So yeah, you can definitely smell a little bit of that nice candied sugar coming out of this beer, and you can smell the lovely big juicy dates coming out of this also. So yeah, the backbone of this beer is very, very interesting. So you get one or two little woody undertones in there. There's a nice kind of, there is definitely a nice sort of wholemealy, brown bready kind of character coming out of this one, which I can really appreciate. So yeah, yeah, a little bit of a kind of brown bready, bread crusty element to this one. Some nice woody elements in there, and yeah, I can certainly appreciate how all of that goes together. But yeah, the yeasty notes in this one are actually not madly prominent. Of course, Belgian beer usually is very big in yeasty and things. The yeast does come out in the aroma quite nicely, but this beer, the brown sugars and the other things that are coming out of the aroma here feel a little bit more kind of prominent. And the beer also smells like it smells like very, very clean as well, which is kind of interesting. It almost smells like quite clean and crisp in a way. But yeah, like I say, backbone to this one, nice kind of brown bready notes, a little bit of a kind of woody element to it, some nice bread crust in there, absolutely. A lot of brown sugar for me. There's a nice little bit of a sweet caramelly note to it, definitely some kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity elements in there, and yeah, I do like how that side of things goes together. Actually, the malty backbone of this one is pretty much what you would expect from a Belgian Dubbel, but yeah, a few woody and nutty undertones. And the brown sugar's got a wee bit of diversity to it as well. You can get a little touch of treacle and molasses out of it. You get a sweet caramel, a bit of a toasty brown sugar, and also a little bit of a kind of biscuity note in there as well. So the malty backbone to this beer does have a little bit of complexity to it, and of course the yeast will be playing a role in there with those nice bready notes. I don't find this one overly doughy right enough. Quite often with these Belgian style beers, the yeast can give you this sort of big doughy kind of note to it. This one actually smells a little bit more kind of bready and slightly grainy as well. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. I do like how it goes together in that sense. So yeah, nice malty backbone to this one. On the hoppy side of things then, it is, you know, pretty much what you would expect. And I guess when these guys are a Slovenian brewery, I'm guessing that they're probably using something along the lines of like, Styrian Goldings or something like this, one of the lower alpha acid, more noble type Slovenian hops. That was quite often the case with the Belgian beers. They grew their own hops in Belgium, and the Belgian hops tend to have a little bit of a kind of earthy character to them, but also a little bit of a kind of herbal quality and some of the more bright qualities that you expect of the German Tettnangers. So Belgian hops are a bit in between the English herbal earthy type thing and the German sort of grassy brightness. They tend to be a little bit like that. But quite often Belgian breweries bring in hops from the Czech Republic and I think from Slovenia as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's something like a Styrian Golding that's in this, just from the aroma. So you do get a little bit of earthiness out of it. There's a very slight herbal quality for me, but the earthiness, I should point out, is very, very smooth, and for me that's one of the traits of Slovenian hops. The green components of these always tend to be very, very smooth. But yeah, and there's a little bit of floral aromaticity to this one as well, quite a bright floral aromaticity I would say too. And you've also got a nice little touch of a kind of grassy note to the beer, and it does have a wee element of zestiness in there as well. But yeah, the green component for me is quite smooth, and it sort of builds a good bridge with the malty and yeasty elements of the beer. But the fruity side of things for me, in this beer, it does have a little bit of a sharp kind of raisiny element to it. The fruits overall smell quite oily, I would add as well. But yeah, it's got a nice little bit of a sharp raisiny element to it. There's some juicy plums underneath. I do get some kind of sultanas out of the beer, but of course it's the dates that really stand out in this one. When they've added dates into the beer as an adjunct, it really comes across as very kind of datey, but you do get a few elements of fig in there, a little bit of a black currant and a blackberry. But yeah, the most prominent fruit in this one is of course the dates, but you can pick up all these other little subtleties in there. But the fruit's a little bit sharp, lovely and juicy, and very slightly oily. as well, actually. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So lovely aroma to this one, definitely worth taking a bit of time to kind of ponder that over, but I think it is about time now that we had a taste of this beer. So yeah, this one is the Double Date, a 7.6% ABV Belgian style Dubbel from Pivovarna Omnivar Brewery, whatever you want to call them, from Ljubljana down in Slovenia. Once again, thank you to Davor for making this review possible. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, skål, cheers, and na zdravje. Oh yeah, that is actually very, very nice. And I have to say, just on the first sip, compared to the other beers that I had from this brewery, which were very, very nice actually, this is the one that kind of comes across as the most sort of authentic almost. This is the one that's maybe, it's like a very straight shooting beer, this one, and very quirky. This is the one that you would kind of try and think, oh, that's a really well done example of this style, whereas the other ones you're like, oh, that's a really very kind of quirky take on the style actually. So yeah, this one, it's quite interesting to try something that's a little bit more along these lines like this brewery, because yeah, the Vienna lager that we had was quite big and yeasty in a sense, it had a few interesting elements to it, but the New England IPA was the same. It was a very, very yeasty forward New England IPA, but to see these guys have a go at a style that is actually a yeast forward style, for me Belgian style beer is a lot more yeast focused than beer from other places. To see them do something like this in their style, it really works. This beer, it's sort of, I don't know if you could say it feels a little bit more kind of normal, but it feels a little bit more natural almost. So I think it's quite natural that they've done a very good double, I think. So well done to Pivovarna Omnivar for this. I've just had one wee sip of it, but I have to say I do like the direction that this one is going in as well. So I'd love to see what these guys would do with a triple and a quadruple as well. That would be a really interesting thing, but this is a solid double actually, so well done to them for this. Yeah, that is very, very nicely done actually. So yeah, it really works. So where do we begin with breaking the flavour of this beer down? So straight away with this beer you can feel that nice sort of brown bready, wholemeally sort of bready thing. That just blankets the middle of your palate there. If you go to the front corners of your tongue and then move diagonally back, again you get a little bit of a sort of woody undertone to the beer, absolutely. So yeah, you can feel a little bit of a woody kind of undertone in the front half of that middle third of your palate there. But then yeah, sitting on top of that, you do get that nice kind of brown bready, wholemeally type bready sort of thing. If you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, the front and in the back end, you do start to get a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty quality coming out of the beer too, which is nice. And if you go to the very centre of your palate and just move forward, you will notice that there's a gradually, you do get a very slight nutty character starts to push its way out of the beer as well. But sitting on top of that kind of bready, doughy, yeasty sort of thing, you've almost got a little bit of a kind of circle in there, and that's where all the brown sugar sits. So in the very dead centre of your palate, sitting on top of the bread, you've got a little bit of a kind of concentrated treacle molasses sort of thing coming out of the beer there. And you know, you can tell from the sort of colour of this one. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on the type of malts that you use, any adjuncts I guess in the case of the Belgian Dubbel, and also the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. You can kind of tell from the colour of this one that this one maybe has a very slightly longer boil or something like that, so you do get an element of that more kind of treacly caramelised brown sugar out of this one. So you can feel that sort of concentrated in the very dead centre of your palate, a slightly more treacly molasses sort of thing. But as you move further out from that, it gets a little bit more kind of lighter and like a sweet caramel, and as you go beyond that, there's a little bit of a toasty brown sugar element, and then out towards the extremities of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of biscuity. It's a little bit more sort of biscuity and It's sort of like McVitie's digestive biscuits. It's kind of like that for me, or cookie-like, I guess some people might say. But yeah, it's actually at the same time, you've got all these different flavours in there, but this beer comes across overwhelmingly as being very, very clean, in fact. So I really like how that goes together in this beer for sure. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer as well complements the kind of brown sugary elements also. So yeah, you've got this lovely oily, kind of just oily brown sugary element to this beer. And as I say, this one, if we're talking about this beer overall, it doesn't come across as one of the most kind of yeasty and bready and doughy doubles that I've had. It comes across as very clean, sort of brown sugar leaning, and quite crisp in a sense. So yeah, definitely an interesting one to review for you here on the channel. Absolutely. But I think Omnivar have done a very, very nice job of this. I think it works really, really well. But I think we've covered the middle third of your palate quite comprehensively on what we've said so far. So yeah, let's look at the other parts of the beer then. So on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a kind of doughy, bready build up in there and a bit of a kind of grainy bread crust. But on the back third of your palate, you can feel there's a nice sort of smooth brown bready element again, and it does get progressively more grainy as you move towards the back of your palate. But sitting on top of that back third of your palate, you can feel the more kind of airy, yeasty elements out of the beer. It does feel like a little bit more of a kind of doughy, sort of wholemealy brown bread that you get out of this one. So yeah, you can feel when you start at the back of the palate, then the flavour is kind of like the height of the flavour almost is kind of like this, and it just gradually condenses down as you move further forward. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it squashes down a little bit, and then just goes into that middle third of your tongue. So yeah, I do like how that goes together, absolutely. The malty side of this beer and the yeasty side of things fits together extremely well. So lovely kind of crisp and clean malty notes, and then the yeasty quality of the beer also comes across as quite clean and compact in a sense. So this is a really interesting take on the Belgian Dubbel style for me. So yeah, so let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a nice little touch of earthiness out of this one, and that gives the beer a little bit of bitterness. But as you move further forward, it's got a little bit of a herbal quality, and that spreads forward a wee bit. And then as you reach maybe the front, the front third of the sides of your palate, it starts to get a little bit more floral and aromatic, and it does have a wee touch of a kind of depth. It's got a bit of depth to it, I think, the floral aromaticity in this one. But I do suspect Slovenian hops in this just because of how smooth the sides of the palate are. But then round the very front curve of the palate, the beer is a little bit brighter and a little bit more sort of grassy in a sense as well. You do get a wee touch of zest out of that front part of the front part of your palate. So yeah, it goes together really nicely. But yeah, fruity side of the beer, I think the fruity side of the beer in this one works very, very well too. But yeah, the green component for me builds a good bridge with the malty and yeasty backbone that the beer has. But let's focus on that front third of your palate then, and all the nice kind of juicy fruity notes that are going on. So on the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up, if you like. You've got a nice little bit of a kind of bread crusty element in there. Then the base of that front third of your palate, is a nice it's that sort of smooth, just brown bready element again there. The bready backbone of this beer, as I say, I think works very, very nicely. But sitting on top of that, of course, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. Remember that with this one, you've also got the dried dates in there. When you add fruit into beer as an adjunct, some of that flavour always comes out around the kind of front edges of your palate. But on the hoppy side of things, I would say, with the fruity side of things at the back of the front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a raisiny sharpness in there. There's a wee bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness in there. Underneath you get a bit of a juicy plum. I would say that towards the back of that front third of your palate, it does have a little bit of a kind of fruity, kind of cakey element to it. And then you can feel, as you move further forward, you do get an element of that kind of datey and figgy note as you push into the front half of that front third of your palate. Then there's a wee touch of a black curranty thing on the front half of that front third of your tongue, and maybe a little tiny element of a blackberry kind of note to this one, a little bit of a sharper blackberry. But overall, I would say that the berry, I would say that the hoppy side of the fruits, they really lean towards a sort of sultana, kind of datey and figgy type quality. You get a lot of dried fruit out of this beer, which makes a lot of sense. But you do have a wee element of a raisiny sharpness in there, a bit of a juicier plum, and as I say, just a little bit of a kind of blackberry element. But you can also feel around the edge of the palate there's a little bit of a pardon me, there's a little bit of a say there's a little bit of a say just kind of dry, datey kind of note to this. You do get, it comes across as a little bit sultana like as well, in fairness, I think, and by sultanas I mean sort of dried white, green and kind of red grapes in a sense. So I do like how this beer goes about its business from that perspective. So yeah, for me it works very, very nicely. So thumbs up to Pivovarna Omnivar for this one. I think it goes together very nicely actually. So yeah, awesome stuff on the fruity side of things. I do like the fact that this leans more towards the dried fruity kind of character, and that really suits the whole vibe of this beer. But yeah, I think that kind of rounds off the flavour profile of the beer quite well, to be honest. It's a very clean, smooth, sweet kind of Belgian style Dubbel. This one, the fruity character is lovely, leaning towards the dry fruity side of things, pardon me, and I think it works very, very well. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, what can we say about the mouthfeel to round off the review? So this beer for me, it's absolutely mid-bodied. It's maybe pushing towards the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation does have a bit of crispness to it in this one. It really has a very kind of wet and slightly clean and quite clean mouthfeel, I should say, this beer overall. The hoppy bitterness of this, I think this is probably about 20 IBUs, something like that. The malty and yeasty backbone, it's quite smooth. It's got a little bit of toastiness and sweet brown sugar to it as well. Then you've got some juicy kind of fruity character to it also. But yeah, it's a very nicely done beer, this one. I think it works very, very well. So yeah, it does give you a nice account of the Belgian Dubbel style actually. So this is definitely worth trying. And as I said, the thing that really strikes me about this beer is that this is a style that is supposed to be yeasty forward. So this feels a little bit more like a kind of authentic beer in a sense from Pivovarna Omnivar, whereas the Vienna Lager and the New England IPA we had from them before came across as a little bit more quirky. This one comes across as very straight shooting and authentic. So I would love to see how these guys do a triple and a quadruple. So hopefully that's something they consider doing at some point in the near future. But yeah, this was lovely. The fruity character's great, the malty and yeasty backbone's good, and the brown sugary elements to it for me make it a very, very nice beer. So yeah, I think we can round off this review there then. This one was the Double Date 7.6% Belgian style Dubbel from Pivovarna Omnivar, or Omnivar Brewery, whatever you want to call them, from Ljubljana, capital city in the centre of Slovenia. So yeah, once again, thank you to Davor for making this review possible. I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. This beer took me a little bit of time to get my head around. I'm also filming this tired, and when I'm tired my reviews tend to be a little bit longer. But yeah, that's just kind of how it goes. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Pivovarna Omnivar, awesome little brewery just getting going in Ljubljana, and I hope that we can review a few more of their beers at some point in the future. Always cool to have some Slovenian reviews for you here on the channel though, and we do have a couple more Davor beers to take a look at over the next little while. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out the brewery. Thank you to Davor once again, and I'll see you guys in the thing below. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer, and let me know your favourite beers from this brewery as well. But Slanje, Skull, cheers, na zdravje, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. This one was the Double Date 7.6% Belgian style Dubbel with dried dates from Pivovarna Omnivar in Ljubljana down in Slovenia. Slanje, Skull, cheers, and na zdravje.